All right. Sweet. I'm fucking live. I'm fucking live. Awesome. Don't know what's happening. I am scared for my life right now. I'll wait for people to get in. I do not know what's going to happen. I feel stupid for not having coasters. I guess I'll just start it. Fuck it. I don't care. All right. Hey, everybody. It's your boy, Funkmaster Bex. Just me this time, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, but whatever. It's just going to be me today talking about not anime, but in fact, some Kino. If I remember correctly, Kino is actually like Dutch for cinema. I'm not talking about films, but I am going to be talking about television, which derives from film, obviously. Um, Everyone I know watched anime this year, and I didn't. So I thought, why not make some content about stuff I consumed this year? So I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe like about less than half of the like 30 plus shows I watched this year. I don't give a shit. It's just like I I have thoughts on these shows. I just wanted to talk about them to some extent. Um, I put them in categories. They're not the they're not like the most smart categories, but I think they're kind of fun. Um, so let's just get down to it. Let's see. Let's start with the first category, which is I couldn't figure out a category for these shows, so fuck it. Awesome category, I know. So let's start with what's a good one to start with? I guess we can start with WandaVision. So this show came out this year. It is part of the I want to say I guess it's part of the MCU, right? Like it's got MCU characters. It takes place in timeline. Might as well call it an MCU show. I watched this show, or I got around to it because everyone wouldn't stop like creaming about it on Twitter back when it was initially airing. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm not like the biggest fan of the MCU, so I was like, okay, let's see if this is like actually like really good, or if this is worth watching. And everyone's like, oh, dude, this is peak MCU, and I'm like, no shit, seriously, okay, cool, whatever. So I watched it, and I gotta say, it's actually like really interesting. I can't say like what the show's about too much because it kind of spoils a lot of. If I had to get into it, it would spoil a lot of. What is it called? Freaking looking for the word. Sorry. Um, Gosh darn, what is the word? Oh, it spoils a lot of MCU films. Sorry. The thing is, I will say it focuses on one character you didn't know would be like a huge deal in the MCU, but they kind of make her a big deal, at least like with the story. The way they tell the story is actually like pretty creative and not something you see a whole lot in television, which is like they'll tell the story through like multiple different like TV shows or like styles of TV shows. So there's like the Dick Van Dyke Show kind of parody. There's like the Malcolm in the Middle parody. There's like the Modern Family parody. There's the Brady Bunch parody, which honestly, this is like the coolest shit ever. I love the way that each episode they change to different styles. And it's revealed why they changed to different styles, and I don't really want to like spoil it too much, but it does deal with like the inner mind of the main character, which is Wanda Maximoff. I think that's her name. I want to say it is. Sure. Um, Thing is, I like this up until a point. The point would be until it became like a big MCU show, if that makes sense. So like obviously with the MCU there's like a final fight with like the big bad or the main villain or whatever it is. And like it kind of became I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say it felt like Dragon Ball Z a little bit. It was like Kamehamehas of like magical powers or just like energy blasts. And I'm just like, wait, this is not as fun as like exploring someone's trauma through like television series or like television series that they have a very strong connection to personally. So I thought that was kind of a letdown. But overall, I liked it. It was cool. I thought that was cool shit. Fuck it. I liked it. You can watch this on Disney Plus. I don't know if anyone here is subscribed to that, but it's whatever. Let's see. What's another show I can talk about? I'm not gonna go too in depth with most shows. I don't really want to talk forever about one specific show. So, oh, let's see. So another show that I watched this year was HBO's Chernobyl. It's a 5-part miniseries aired in like 2019. Finally got around to it this year. This show is basically about, well, you could guess, the Chernobyl disaster from, what was it, like 1984? Somewhere in the mid-80s. It happened during the Soviet Union. There's a big theme of the show is, like, just how kind of irresponsible the Soviet Union was in handling all of this. Everything that you think could happen that was terrible, every bad thing that you think could happen in a situation like this does in fact happen. It's might be like one of the most irresponsible governments I've ever seen in my life or had witness in television. Although I would say if America had like the same situation, I would bet you money they would do even worse. Low key. That's all I'll say. One thing that I thought was interesting while watching this in 2021 was like the parallels between this and like, not to get like political, but how America handled, let's say, the COVID disaster, or I guess the pandemic, in the sense that like way more people died than there really should have been, if that makes sense. Like a lot of measures could have been taken, a lot of things that could have been done in a short amount of time weren't done, and there's like such a waste of life of this. This show is very dark. It's very depressing after a while. It's reflected in the very muted color palette. Lots of greens, blues, grays, blacks. It's very well acted. It's actually pretty well paced for like 5 episodes. Each episode is about an hour long, but it's like it does a pretty good job of like telling the big beats of the, I guess, the whole account of it. I know a little bit about Chernobyl going into it. I did a report on the Soviet Union in like middle school, and one of the things I talked about, or I did research on, was Chernobyl itself, because that was a whole thing on like Wikipedia. But I would recommend this if you're looking for something that's kind of like, if you want like something more historically accurate. I mean, there's like a couple of like show original characters in the show for, storytelling reasons, and that's fine. But for the most part, it's actually pretty fucking accurate from what I've researched. I wouldn't recommend it if you're kind of like easily saddened by things that are pretty fucking depressing. Definitely don't watch it because of that. You can watch it on HBO Max. I'm not paid by any of these streaming sites. I'm just saying where you can find it, if that makes sense. Yeah, I like this a lot. It's probably like maybe like top 5 material for me, like period. All right. What's the next show I can talk about? All right, I guess I'll talk about Fleabag next. So aside from like the Sopranos rewatch that I did this year, this might be one of my favorite shows ever that I've watched for the first time. This show means a lot to me. The premise is basically like life of a woman who's kind of a asshole. She's not a good person, but like you can't help but like kind of root for her. She's surrounded by people who are in a lot of ways worse than her. Like they're not great people, but like she's definitely better than them in a lot of ways. And maybe in some ways she's not, but she at least is likable to some extent. That's nice, I guess. She's very charismatic. It's mostly a comedy. It's a very dark comedy. It's only 12 episodes. Each episode is about 30 minutes. Each season is about 6 episodes. 2 seasons, that's a whole core of anime. You'll have no excuse not to watch this unless you don't have Amazon Prime, which that's the platform it's on. So if you don't have that, maybe you can't, but like if you do have Amazon Prime, you've probably been like this show's probably been marketed to you if you have Amazon Prime, or if you have Prime Video. You've probably seen ads for this. Not ads, but like, yeah, ads on like the sidebar or the top or whatever, like, oh, watch Fleabag. And I'm like, for a long time I didn't, because I didn't think it would be good. I didn't know what it was about, and I just saw like the picture of her with like the like after she like cries and she has like makeup in her, like makeup running down her face, and I'm like, I don't know what this is about. I'm not going to check it out. But for whatever reason, I just checked it out just out of curiosity one day. I was like, fuck it, why not? And I did. And I loved it a lot. It like appeals to me. I don't know why. It just does. I guess because I like shows about people who are kind of not the best people, but they try anyway. I guess I resonate with that on some level. What does that say about me? I don't know. But oh, what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah, no. I guess if I were to say what like the almost the interesting part about the show was like how, I wouldn't say meta, but like it breaks the fourth wall a lot. Often the main character will just like look directly in the camera. Like this is The Office, but they're not filming a documentary. It's like she's the only person that will just look into the camera and just say something, often in the middle of a conversation with another character. The other character will not notice this at all. And it's like a really interesting insight into her character, or who she is as a person, as like this kind of snarky asshole. But like we all kind of have this sort of thing. Like that's her, that like if you've had a conversation, you'll probably have like internal thoughts about something, but you don't say it out loud. She says the parts that are probably in her head a lot to you in a really interesting way. It's actually very cool. I like it a lot. Let's see. So beyond that, what am I gonna do? Sorry, I'm a little sleepy today. I only got like 2 hours of sleep, so apologies. Let's see. As for other shows that I couldn't fit into a category, we're gonna have to talk about, of course, Sex and the City. I know this is where everyone's like, "Oh fuck, seriously, you're gonna talk about Sex and the City?" I'm like, yeah. There's a reason why I started Sex and the City, and if you know me, you're gonna be surprised, but also at the same time not surprised. And that is, of course, because I saw this one tweet earlier this year comparing Sex and the City to The Sopranos in what is considered maybe like the stupidest way possible. So like for like a little bit of I guess context, Sopranos does involve like white dudes, aka Italians. This is some real Italian discrimination, Italian erasure right here. It does involve like a bunch of dudes killing each other because, well, they're in the mafia. Like, what the fuck do you think it is? But like the thing is like that's not why Sopranos is considered an untouchable classic. It's probably because it's a good show. If I were to guess, it's probably because it's a good show. Sex and the City, on the other hand, it just, I'll go into details to why I don't find the show as like much of a classic as Sopranos is. I think the first thing is like, she also says that like Sex and the City is supposedly considered like embarrassingly retro and borderline offensive. I'll start with that. So the ways that it's retro, I'm going to start with like something a little bit more shallow, but I would say the fashion is a little bit shallow. I mean, it takes place from 1998 to 2004, the original run of the series. And it's like, if you're familiar with like 2000s fashion, you'll see it in the show and you're like, wow, this is so fucking 2000s. That's the most shallow thing, but like it's a shot, the real like retroness of it is probably how it depicts like other groups of people, namely like non-white women, non-straight white, non-cis straight white women. Like this show will just make jokes at the expense of trans people, people of color, women of color, LGBTQ in general. There's an entire episode actually where a lot of the characters are just convinced that being bisexual is not actually a thing and you just have to pick a side, so to speak, which is like kind of fucked up. I'm not gonna lie. That's like, whoa, I wouldn't say that. Whoa. There's episodes where there's like they can't stand being like next to the supposedly loud and obnoxious transgender people, which is like gross. They use a lot of like transgender slurs, like it's like casually, and it's like, oh, this show is definitely 2000s for sure. Would probably wouldn't fly today. Plus it's like its view of dudes, so I guess I should explain what the appeal of Sex and or the premise of Sex and the City is. Sex and the City is basically like four white women in their 30s who are just trying to find a dude to spend the rest of their life with, and then also kind of have sex with a bunch of dudes at the same time. They're kind of like looking for the one. They're dating. They're in the dating world. They're like trying to find the one. And like you do that for like 90 something episodes. So like a lot of the time, so obviously you can't like just find the right guy the first time. Like that's true for life, right? Like you can't just find your partner first time. It's never that easy. It's never that simple. But I gotta say, a lot of the dudes that come across, or a lot of the dudes that are written in this show, are like really, or like kind of okay dudes. There's nothing like really wrong with them, except for like one defining feature that is like almost cartoonishly funny at times, where they're just like, oh, well, he's a good guy, but he yells really loud when he like jizzes, which is like, who the fuck cares? Why is that a problem? You know, like, oh, I can't spend the rest of my life with this person for whatever reason. And then sometimes they'll actually like give a little bit of nuance to characters, which I do like in later seasons. But for the most part, it's like kind of the same episode over and over again. I don't know. Maybe it just doesn't appeal to me because I'm a dude watching this show in like 2021 and thinking, well, this is so of its time. There's another thing that's like kind of embarrassingly retro, is like the like materialism of the show, the consumerism. It seems like often a lot of these characters are just kind of, how do I put this, obsessed with shopping. And there's nothing wrong with shopping. Shopping can be very therapeutic. I agree with that to some extent. But the thing is like, these people will just spend like hundreds of dollars on shoes. Like, I think the main character of the show, Carrie, canonically spends about $40,000 on shoes, or she has spent about $40,000 on shoes, which is like, holy shit. Like, for me as like a working class citizen, like, I wish I had, first of all, I wish I had $40,000 just in general, not just to spend on shoes, but like 40 grand in general. Like, that is like, I cannot relate to these people. This is a whole nother world to me. This is like, I can't even process this. A lot of these women have like super nice jobs, or just at least very well off. And it's like, I guess for me, I'm like, maybe that's something I could aspire to later on in life, but like, I just don't know if that's possible or if that's likely. You know what I mean? I guess that's kind of what like bugged me a lot of the time with this show. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this show. Like, it's not the worst show ever. There's actually some nice, touching episodes that deal with like other issues beyond, oh my god, they ran out of the nice shoes. I can't buy my $400 shoes. Wah. But for the most part, I just thought, wow, some of these people are kind of shallow. See, that's the thing though, is like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to like, what's the term, kind of get behind them, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to root for these people, or if these are just imperfect people that I'm otherwise, you know, supposed to cheer on. By the end of the show, I'm like, I think these people are like in a whole nother world, and I just simply cannot get behind them. There's also a couple movies, and I gotta say, don't watch them. If you ever watch the series, don't watch the movies. It like takes everything like good about the show and then like throws that out of the window and only gives you the luxury, the materialism, the consumerism, and says, yes, this is cool. This is what you should aspire for. I should say this show came out before the recession. Actually, the movies came out during and after the recession. And it's like, how tone deaf can you be? Like, this is gross. I don't like this. This is disgusting. But yeah, it's no Sopranos. I'll just say that much. All right. Oh yeah, no. Forgot to read the chat. Women be shopping. That is unironically, um, that is unironically what the show is. The show is a lot of the time is just women be shopping. But yeah. All right. So I guess it's hard to talk about Sex in the City without talking about the other show that is kind of marketed as like the Sex in the City but for dudes. And of course, I'm talking about Entourage. What is Entourage? Well, besides being the Sex in the City for dudes, it's mostly about, well, it's entirely about like, well, this guy is Entourage. The guy in the middle, his name is Vinny Chase. And he's got like he's from Queens. He's this big superstar, up and coming, sexy superstar who's been in some movies, and he's like wants to be an even bigger superstar, and he wants to take his best friends from Queens like along for the ride. And you think, huh, I guess that could be kind of fun. And it kind of is for like the first 2 seasons. What bothers me about the show, I guess, is that it hasn't really aged well in a lot of ways. A lot of people who like this show, or at least when the first couple seasons were coming out, were saying that this is a satire of like be living in Hollywood, being like a superstar. And I don't know if that's true, because I don't know if this show like actually works as a satire, if that makes sense. For me, by the end of the show, I don't think it's a satire at all. I think it actually kind of champions the lifestyle that these characters live. I should probably say that these characters live like just a crazy lifestyle, like just spending money on like cars and boats and just like hanging out with ladies in bikinis. And I never get the intent that this is like critical of anything, but like, yeah, this is cool, bro. I like this. This is cool shit, dude. That's what I get from the show every time I watch it. There's nothing like, there's no like sense of like, is this the right thing? Is this what we should aspire to be? Is this hashtag goals? At least for me, that's what I get out of it. The show is also like embarrassingly retro in the sense that like if you watch it, you're like, oh wow, this is definitely from the 2000s. Again with the slurs, again with the the way that the show treats women is actually kind of comical. Most female characters on the show only exist to be like wanted by like the dudes to be fucked or whatever. There is rarely like a female character that's just like there beyond like Vince's publisher. Besides that, like every woman is like not even given a name. If you check the credits for like episode credits, a lot of the female characters that show up in an episode don't even get a name. They're just girl. Like they don't even get names, even though like they're not important characters. You could still give them a name. But like a lot of the dude characters that are in like say one episode, they get a name. I don't know, just something kind of interesting. Like to bring it back to the whole like satire thing, you could argue that this show is about like a bunch of white dudes like failing upwards in like the industry. I could understand that if the show like actually kind of did that, like as like that's how it's framed, but it's framed as like, oh, this is good actually. Like I finish an episode, I'm like, wow, I wish I was these dudes. I wish I could just hang out at the beach all the time, drink, eat, and then like have sex with women, and then not give a shit, and then maybe be in a movie every once in a while. No repercussions to my actions. That's the biggest thing, actually, is like things will happen to characters, but like nothing, like, you know, like bad things, right? But like nothing like really changes. They don't change. They're just the same people going doing the same things over and over again. But yeah, it is what it is. I wanted to talk about this show especially because like I guess what I'm trying to say is like my struggle with like thinking that it's like a satire is like because of an interview that I read with the creator of the show, Doug Allen, is like he thinks, I don't know, I don't think he understands like his own show to some extent. Like that's kind of my take. Of course, I'm saying, let's see if I can, there we go. Doug Allen claims HBO Max hides Entourage for not being woke enough, which, the thing is like, if there was a reason why Doug Allen like, or not Doug Allen, sorry, if there was a reason why HBO Max supposedly hid their like a show that was pretty big at the time, it ran for like 8 seasons, 2004 through 2011, like that's pretty good. I guess for HBO standards, that's pretty good, but if I had to guess why HBO kind of, if they were to supposedly quote unquote hide that show, it's probably because 2 of the main stars got like, you know, accused of sexual assault in the past couple of years. And like when that happens, it's like, well, that's not a good look for anybody. You know what I mean? If you're wondering, the 2 actors is Kevin Connolly and Jeremy Piven. They're actually, Jeremy Piven is the person, Ari, if you will, on the left of the picture, leftmost. Kevin Connolly plays E on the rightmost. Both of them accused of sexual assault, which is ironic because Jeremy Piven's character definitely performs sexual assault a couple times on the show, which is extremely ironic. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, dude. This show is a weird show, dude. It's very weird. It's weird because like I've thought about this show the most out of like most shows that I actually liked. Like I like this show like stays in my head for whatever reason. Probably because of that Doug Allen interview where he is like, oh, he gets really defensive about like people being very critical of the show. Because I should say, Entourage didn't end on a bang. It ended on like, oh, we're done with the show kind of thing. Like it ran for maybe 3 seasons too long. The show gets kind of like really bad when it's like post-recession, I would say. I think it probably should have stopped at around season 4. At least that's when it was kind of fun. But then they started adding like quote unquote like more serious arcs. And I'm just like, the show has no stakes. Nothing happens to anyone. There's no consequences. So why would you even try to have consequences? And we already know nothing changed. The status quo doesn't change. Why would you even bother with that, you know? But yeah, he was very defensive about like a show that no one really even talks about Entourage at this point. Like I'm probably the only person bringing up Entourage in 2021 besides the creator of Entourage. Only because I watched it out of like pure curiosity. I saw that it was like 8 seasons, so I'm like, okay, well there must be something to it. And then I realized Game of Thrones goes on for 8 seasons, and like no one likes the last 3 seasons. So, you know, right? Oh, this show also has a movie. It's pretty down there with like the Sex and the City movies. Is like, oh, this might be one of the worst things I've ever watched. Like, period. Oh, hey, Nix, what's going on? All right. There's probably more I could say about Entourage, but I think I've gone on for like way too long about this fucking show. Let's see. All right. These are all the shows that I wanted to talk about in the category, if that makes sense. Let's see. So on to the next category would be... What is this called? Oh. Shows I think are cool. Unfortunately, they are not completed. So I guess what I want to start with is Barry on HBO. So Barry is essentially about a hitman who wants to leave the life of being a hitman into the world of theater. So for me, like I like this because I used to do theater in high school. So I'm like, oh, cool. It's got Bill Hader. Bill Hader is low-key one of the best people we've had in, like, I guess more modern SNL cast, or like one of the better like graduates of like modern era SNL. He definitely like brings his A game with this show. This show is like very funny, but also like very dark at the same time. I don't want to spoil anything, but like it gets very serious as far as like storylines go. I mean, you kind of have to, because it's like it's about a world of crime. You can't just be like haha funny jokes all the time. But if there's one thing I do like about this is like I didn't realize how good of a actor Bill Hader is. Like I know him from like SNL, and like he does a great job of being funny, and he does a fantastic job of being like a great actor that plays a bad actor, if that makes sense. That's actually harder than you think it is. Want to put that out there. But like he actually like really holds his own on like dramatic scenes. The show's only 2 seasons long. Each episode is about 30 minutes. It's actually like a pretty easy breezy cover girl kind of watch, you know what I mean? But I was going to say, this show reminds me a lot of Sopranos. There's a very obvious Sopranos influence that I like about it. But yeah, I like it a lot. I would say I would recommend it if you're looking for something that balances comedy and like drama exceedingly well. Even the supporting actors do a really good job in this show. That's all I'm gonna say. It's hard to talk about this without like spoiling it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I quite like it. All right, that's probably enough for Barry. Now we'll move on to Atlanta on FX. So this show is only 2 seasons so far, but it seems to be like very well regarded already. I can kind of see why. If I were to explain like the premise of the show, the premise isn't like the most interesting thing. It's kind of more like the execution that kind of shines. The premise is basically main character played by Donald Glover. You may know him from a bunch of other shit. Very talented guy. Always working on something. But basically he's like this character, Ern, who's kind of like not super wealthy. He's very poor. It's revealed that he's extremely poor. He sees that his cousin Alfred is like this up and coming Atlanta rapper. He kind of sees like a little bit of like, hey, this could help me like get some money, kind of thing. So he wants to be like aka Paperboy. That's Alfred's like rapper's name. AKA like Paperboy wants to be Paperboy's manager, and it's like kind of the first season at least is about them kind of trying to like make it in the industry, at least on a local level, because like he's not like a superstar yet, but like you kind of have to go through all of this like bullshit of like the industry, and there's a lot of commentary on it, and that's kind of what I was bringing up. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is like the execution is like it's way more about like getting into the industry, and way more of a social commentary, which I love. That I was My favorite parts of the show are actually the ones that are less about the main premise, if that makes sense. For season 1, I thought it was okay. I think there were some great episodes in season 1, but once we get into season 2, aka Robin season, which I like that it doesn't even go by season 2, it's just straight up Robin season. Robin season takes everything that I love about the show from season 1 and then like amps it up to like almost a 10, which is fantastic. They're way more experimental shit. There's just straight up like bottle episodes that like don't even really connect to like the main story, but it actually kind of like connects to the world of Atlanta itself. Like it kind of reminds me of The Wire in a couple of ways. Like the city of Atlanta is like its own breathing, living character through this show. And that's infinitely more interesting than like the main plot for me. And I like that the show kind of went in like, it kind of meanders a bit, but like in the best way possible. There's a lot, I mean, like obviously like there's a lot of commentary on like being black in America in this show. Maybe that's not the best way to put it. It's like commentary on like the struggles of the black community, at least in the context of the city of Atlanta. And I don't know if I can comment on that as a white person, but I do think it's interesting to watch. The show is like, it's got like 2 more seasons planned at least. I'm looking forward to seasons 3 and 4, mostly because here it comes. Boom. Like if you're gonna like compare it to like a big heavyweight show like that, then shit, you must be like really making like the best show ever. It's like also like half the reason I started the show. So yeah. Oh, I should also add that a lot of the actors in the main cast kind of like this show helped jumpstart their careers. Just wanted to point that out. Like after watching this show, I noticed that a lot of these actors are in like other movies that came out because season 1 aired like what 2016. A lot of these actors were just in a bunch of big stuff. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't remember any of their names, so I can't really like prove that, but like I can't prove it on the spot, but like if you look up the cast and then you look up what they're in post season 1, it seems like this movie, or not this movie, but this show kind of jump started. I wouldn't say jump started, but like man, did it really help a lot of people's careers. And it should. A lot of them are, they're all fantastic actors. They really do bring it in this show. What was I gonna say? Oh, the music selection is really good in the show as well. It's all source music. I don't think there's any what's it called? Like soundtrack. It's all just like it's like a bunch of songs used diegetically. But I do like that. A lot of it like gives the show a lot of flavor, if you will. So yeah. Let's see. Okay. You can watch it on FX. I don't know if I said that already, but who cares? So here is the last one in this category, which is Succession. You can watch it on HBO, obviously. How do I explain this show? Because it's like the premise sounds insanely boring, but it's actually the execution that like what makes it for me. This show, if I were to explain the premise in a really simplistic way, it would basically be, so like there's this like media conglomerate owned by the guy in the purple jacket right there, Logan Roy. It's basically like a Fox News thing. Like that's the kind of media conglomerate it is. It's like $1 billion like asset basically. And he has this whole family of people, or he has a bunch of kids who are kind of like, in a way, kind of scheming against each other to one day like be the successor to own that media conglomerate. Because it's like, well, why wouldn't you? Like, you can be the richest person in the world basically. If you control information, you control the world basically, right? like that sounds kind of fun, but it's actually like low key really funny. There's a lot of it actually kind of reminds me in a lot of ways of like The Office in the way that it's shot. Like you will have like reactions, you will have like this zoom to like people's like facial reactions. Where you're like, wait, did they just fucking say that? Kind of thing. But it's like has this more like prestigious kind of vibe to it. It's still funny, but like definitely not like, oh, we're shooting a documentary. It's like this is just how people are, you know? Like there's a lot of like how do I explain this? There's a lot of like it's mostly a lot of talking. So I know a lot of people might not be into that if it's just scenes of people talking, but the dialogue is fantastic. For me, I don't really care if it's a bunch of talking. I think talking can build character, it can move scenes forward. Like if the talking itself is fine, like I think the show can like thrive off talking. But there's like a lot of political intrigue, there's a lot of like business deals being made. It's all about kind of the art of the deal, if you will. Um Everyone's kind of gunning, all the children are kind of gunning for that position, but like often people will be making like what's the term, alliances with each other, and then like suddenly break that alliance for like their own personal gain, which is obvious that they like kind of get it from their father, because their father is like such a, I don't know how to say it, but he's a deal maker, and he's pretty ruthless. But the thing that's interesting is watching everyone kind of like rat race their way to like the top and like fuck over each other. That's interesting as like a family dynamic. Like at the same time, they're also family, so it's like exceedingly kind of fucked up. A lot of these people are pretty fucked up, actually. I won't spoil anything, but like people will do things that it's just like, oh fuck, that's insanely fucked. If I fail to sell this show, that's because it's kind of hard to sell. That's all I'll say. Oh, I should say this show is like only 2 seasons so far. The third season is actually airing. What time is it right now? It's probably going to air in like 10 minutes. The third season is currently airing. It airs on Sundays. I'm waiting to like for this third season to air so I can watch it, because I like binging things as opposed to watching it week to week. So I'm looking forward to it. I should say that each season finale is like top tier. Season 2 is like kind of one of the best season finales I've ever watched, I think, period, without giving anything away. It's actually like impeccable. It's impressive. Breathtaking, if you will. All right. Let's see. So that's it for Succession. That's it for the shows I think are cool. Unfortunately, they are not completed category. All right, what's next on the agenda? We got the last one, which is okay. Well, obviously, Sopranos had an impact on these series, no? Which is like, if you know me, I'm a big Sopranos guy, huge Sopranos fan. I never shut the fuck up about it. I've actually been taking shots of alcohol every time I mention it, so I'm like kind of getting exceedingly drunk right now. So there's that. I got 2 shows to talk about. I could talk about Mad Men, but I'm not going to, because I don't know if I want to continue doing these. I got a bunch of other shows I could talk about. I just didn't want to go on for like hours and hours about 30 different shows. But I'll talk about the ones that seemed the most obviously impacted by Sopranos, or Sopranos had a huge impact on. And that would be Breaking Bad. I don't know why they call it Breaking Bad. It's actually a pretty good show. Just don't get that. I'll never understand that. So obviously Breaking Bad is impacted by... Sopranos had a huge impact on Breaking Bad. I think it was either the creator of the show or Bryan Cranston himself, who plays Walter White, said, without Tony Soprano, there would be no Walter White. And I agree. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. This show is actually like... I don't know if it's been said before, but it's very good. It's very well plotted. It's very well structured. There are some impressive antagonists in the show. I like this show like a fuck ton. Yeah. I think the impact that Sopranos had is kind of obvious in the sense that like there are entire characters whose personalities or like character traits feel, I want to say ripped off. I'm not going to say ripped off because I think that's kind of negative. I'm just going to say very, very influenced by Sopranos. Like you have Jesse, who is a drug addict, reminds me of Christopher from Sopranos. You've got Walter and Jesse's like dynamic slash relationship as like Walter is kind of a father figure in a very vague way, kind of a father figure to Jesse, mentor father figure, and that reminds me a lot of Tony and Christopher. There's the whole main character has blonde wife thing that I've seen in plenty of other shows that came after Sopranos. I don't know if that Sopranos made that a thing, but it amuses me every time I see it. I guess Walter's wife, not Jesse. Fuck, what's her name? Skylar. Skylar has blonde hair. I've noticed that both Walter and Tony are Steely Dan fans. That's a little bit more like, it's not a big deal, but I thought that was just funny to mention. What else was I going to say? I guess I could say what I like about this show. I like that the show feels kind of like one movie. Like this show is designed for binging, which is probably why it's like why it was really successful and probably gained a lot of traction as soon as it went on Netflix. Because I think the show didn't like blow up until like season 3, and I think season 1 and 2 were on, because this originally aired on AMC network television, but they put season 1 and 2 on Netflix, and people were like fucking dying to get to like what happens next, or knowing what happens next after season 2. It's like kind of an adrenaline rush. Sorry, I can't say words today. You're like, fuck, I gotta know what happens to Walt and Jesse, or like whatever character. It's like, it does a really good job of that. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of like, I wouldn't say it's like cliffhangers, but like this show, I could not imagine watching this show week to week airing, which is why I'm glad I finally watched the show like in one binge earlier this year. I think Walt's a interesting character. Obviously not a good person, especially by the end of the show for sure. But I think he was not a great person from the start, low-key, but that's just me. I think Jesse's an interesting character. I think Gustavo is probably one of the best antagonists in TV, probably. I love Hank. Hank's a dude who rocks. Love that guy. Despite being a cop, he's a cool guy. Skylar is actually an interesting character in the sense that I was very surprised to see that there was a lot of hatred for Skylar, despite Skylar being pretty correct for most of the show. Like her position, which was, I can't allow like this guy to cook meth to like, you know, provide for my family, because they got another kid out. In the beginning of the show, they have like another kid on the way. Him being a high school chemistry teacher doesn't really like pay the bills, so he resorts to meth, which is like exceedingly fucked up, but like that's a compelling premise, to be honest. She's like, well, I can't have you doing that because that's exceedingly fucked up, because you're contributing to like, you know, drug addictions and the drug war and all that shit. And like Walt, being the asshole that he is, he's like, well, we got to provide for the family, you know. And it's like, oh, okay. And then I read like all these like fan reactions to the show, and it's like they all hated Skylar, and they seem to be okay with Walt, which is like, okay, sure. I mean, yeah, I understand to some extent, like you got to provide for your family considering the position that you're in, but it's like, with drugs, really, with drugs, I understand that you're gonna die soon of cancer, but like, drug dealing is not okay. It's not. So Skylar having like the most correct position, then everyone kind of like flipping their shit about Skylar, like made zero sense to me. That's true, collapse. That's very true. That's all I'm gonna say. That's true. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, sorry, I was a little distracted by something. Um, I think the ending of the show, well, not spoiling it because I know not everyone's seen it, um, is like it's good. It's really good. I can see why people like why people would consider it the greatest ending in television. It's very satisfactory. It's very like there's not really any loose ends. I mean, there kind of is, and there's a movie that kind of like ties even more loose ends, and we'll get to that movie. I mean, I might as well just get to that movie now. It's called El Camino. It's basically gives the end like it ties all of the ends that are related to Jesse. It comes out like was it like 6 years after the series ended, and it was like that's cool. That movie was cool. I was actually pretty content with like how it ended in the series as opposed to like how the movie tells it. Not how the movie tells it, but like as opposed to getting more information. Like, you know, lore expansion is cool and all, but like sometimes you're just content with what you got. Like it's really hard to talk about this with like out without like just outright saying what happens in the ending of the show. But the movie was like it's cool if you wanted more Breaking Bad. That's all I'll say. I feel like there was something. Oh, I gotta say, my favorite episode of the show was the Fly episode in season. I don't know if it's season 3 or 4, where they just spend an entire episode trying to get rid of a fly in the lab, and it's probably the funniest shit ever. It actually reminds me of an episode of Sopranos called Pine Barrens, where two characters spend the majority of the episode lost in a forest, and they have to get out, and they struggle to like escape the forest, and it's a very like almost like a Three Stooges type of thing going on with that episode. It's very comedic. This episode of Breaking Bad, The Fly, feels very comedic. I like when the show is kind of funnier and goofier. So like there's also that scene, well there's the bonfire scene, which I realize not everyone's seen, but like there's a scene where there's probably the funniest music, I guess, insert I've seen in television. It's hard to explain, but like if you get to it, just look out for the bonfires. You'll know what I mean because there's a song that just says bonfire a whole bunch of times, and it's like the scene itself is just hilarious. Can't get enough of that scene. So yeah, Breaking Bad, great show. I can totally see why people love this. Do I think it's like on the same level as Sopranos? I can see someone putting like this on like the Mount Rushmore of like great television. Uh, I'd probably put that up there. I along with like Sopranos or like a Mad Men or maybe even a Fleabag. I have to give it more time, but Fleabag's pretty up there. Um, yeah, it's a good show. Like it. Good shit. But yeah. Let's see. I got one more show because we've gone on for about an hour. I think that's probably a good time. Which is Sons of Anarchy. So like I've only seen one season of this, so I might be actually kind of being like too harsh on this. But it reminds me of Sopranos. Except like they took all of like the cool stuff out of it. So like there's like not really much of the psychoanalysis that makes Sopranos kind of unique to other shows. It's mostly just crime stuff. But instead of like Italian mafia, it's like biker gang. And like that's cool and all. Like don't get me wrong, like seeing crime stuff is cool and every once in a while, but like it's like kind of lacking the substance a little bit that Sopranos had. I know I keep like saying Sopranos is like this bastion, not bastion, but like this pillar of television. It kind of is. Like it is. It walks so a lot of shows could probably run. Like for reference, the show came out a year after Sopranos finished airing, so like it's pretty obvious. Like there are even like characters that are like really obviously remind me of Sopranos characters. Like there's the character Wendy, who is a heroin addict. It's actually played by a character, or played by an actress that was in Sopranos, Drea D'Amadio, who was the partner of Chris, romantic partner of Chris, who I've said before is a heroin addict. I felt like that was a pretty clear Sopranos reference. The character played by Ron Perlman is like kind of reminds me of Tony, in that he's sort of the devil, if I could describe him like that. Like he's just not a good person. He's like kind of the boss of the gang, and like kind of almost a father figure to the like other main character, which is Jax, played by what is his name, like Charlie Bunman or something. He's been in a bunch of other stuff, but like it's pretty obvious. I mean, there's some different differences between the two series, but it does feel very influenced by it, but I don't think it's as interesting. It's like pretty clearly just crime, and like the appeal for like what made like Sopranos different from like other shows about crime is like Sopranos will also just take time to just be about suburban life, as opposed to just this show being about being in the gang. And like it just doesn't do anything for me personally. Maybe I'm just kind of maybe it'll do other things in season 2. I've been told season 2 is good by someone who has only watched season 2 and didn't watch season 1. So there's that. That's always fun. What was I going to say? Oh, the intro is absolutely ass. I gotta say. I'm happy that this show has an intro, because not every show that comes out these days actually has an intro. It's kind of a dying art. If you watch like any, what is it called, Netflix show, there will just not be an intro, and there will just be like fucking like it'll just go straight to the title sequence and then the episode itself. And I'm like, what the fuck? Bring us back the intros. Bring us back the banger openings. Like that gets me excited. Like fuck yeah, dude. That's awesome. At least gets me into a series, but what do I know? Oh, that's kind of all I have to say. Oh, I gotta say, a lot of these performances in the show kind of phoned in. That's a huge thing. Ron Perlman, like you'd expect him to be good, but he's just kind of there. There's Katie Segal, who plays Jax's mom and Ron Perlman's character's wife. You may know her from Futurama and that one Disney Channel original movie where she plays like she's like a robot in a house. I think it's hard to explain. It's like I don't know. She's like a robotic mom in a house, but she's also like connected to the house. Like whatever. It doesn't make any sense, but it's a good movie. I think it was a cool movie. I like it. What was I gonna say? Oh, she kind of phones it in. Maybe the performances get better in later seasons, but like, whatever. Who gives a shit? Yeah, actually, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I might do more of these in the future. I don't know. Maybe I'll talk about Sopranos at some point. Who knows? But yeah, it's cool. I hope everyone had a good time. I hope everyone like wears a mask. I hope everyone gets vaccinated. I love you. Please stay safe out there. It's a dangerous world. You could get beat up by a biker gang. I'm not sure. So yeah, I had a fun time doing this. I was a little nervous, but you know, I could always get better. I guess I'll just end the stream here. See you, everybody.